Property Rights, Children, and Land. Welcome to Episode 4 of Liberty and Morality Defined. Everywhere I go, in the various liberty movements and circles, people are talking about property rights. But where do property rights actually come from? What is the actual foundation of ideas from which property rights stem? Everybody likes to say, well, property rights just exist. They just are. It's like the universe. And by everybody, specifically I mean self-proclaimed anarchists, voluntarists, abolitionists, libertarians, big L and small L libertarians. They just say, well, it just is. People don't actually take the time to explain where property rights come from. Now, before you jump on my shoulders and tell me, well, you need to read this book and this book and this book, and you'll understand it's just given. Well, slow down there. There's a reason why I haven't read a lot of things, and a reason why I have read certain things and not other things, and why I don't go and read a lot of other things. If you recall in a previous episode that I recorded, language, tone, and reputation, I discussed complex language. Well, it's kind of like that for me. A lot of times they'll write a book or write a passage or record an episode of a podcast or some sort of audio or video show, and they'll wait until halfway through after giving me some lecture as to what X is all about, what the main point of the show is. They have to give some big build-up, and that's frustrating, because I don't need a history lesson of why John Locke said this, or why Leo Tolstoy said this, or Stefan Molyneux did this. I don't care. I want the information. And I'm just as guilty of that as anybody else is. However, that being said, if you can build up a premise without having to lecture somebody about it, that's probably for the best, because you want to get your ideas out there and not bore people to death. Sometimes there's just no way around having to give that lesson. But I can tell you right now that I've defined liberty, I've defined morality, and I haven't needed to go and give you a lecture about what John Locke said, or Sun Tzu said, or what Marcus Aurelius of Rome said, 2,000 years ago. I've been able to do this without that. And in the spirit of that tradition, I'm going to continue to do the same thing with property rights. So property rights, essentially, like morality, they are founded in you recognizing the value that you have in your own life. By placing value on your own life, okay, respecting that, wanting that respected, even if you don't actually relay this idea to somebody else, this is what happens essentially. You homestead your body. You homestead your essence. Okay? That right there is the foundation of all property rights. You are making a claim by actively maintaining and improving the quality of your life as you see fit. Now, you recognize this in other individuals too. Okay? This right here is the foundation of property rights and consent hand in hand. This is important to understand. You are making an active claim over your body. You own your body. You are telling the world that because I take care of myself, I own me. That is what you're saying. Now, but that's just so simple. There's got to be somebody else has like God or something. No. Don't even think about that. Get rid of that thought, because when you invoke somebody else giving you a right to what you are doing yourself, no God, no government, no nothing does for you what you do for you. If you're upset by that, if that makes you angry, frustrated, you don't have to finish listening to this. You can stop, you can go back, and you can go to whatever else. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to be upset or offended. And at at the risk of sounding snobbish and condescending, I'm not going to lose sleep over that. Because I understand, as I wish other people would, that I do for me. I can pray all I want, but at the end of the day, those prayers, it doesn't seem to do anything. It gives me solace in my own head and helps organize the thoughts in my head. That's really about it. I'm not saying that there's not something else out there, because I actually do believe in a higher power. I don't really know what that is. That higher power has not come to me specifically and said, hey, look, guess what? I'm the higher power. I can do this, this, and this, and this, and this. What can I help you with today? Until something like that kind of happens, I'm going to be very skeptical of it. Some part of me, at the end of the night, I still pray. I still say the Our Father prayer before I go to sleep at night. But that's between me and me. I'm not forcing it on anybody else. Call me a hypocrite if you want, that's fine, but at least my hypocrisy doesn't affect your life in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Now, as far as you homesteading your life, that's basically the foundation of self-ownership. And once you have established self-ownership, then you can establish other property rights. Now, this is a concept, okay? This concept here is an extension of self-defense mechanism that is morality. Okay, this is our actual first boundary that we're placing for everybody else. Don't touch me, talk to me, or interact with me unless I give you my consent. Now, we can go up and, hey, excuse me, ma'am, may I ask you, okay? That kind of interaction is expected because you have to have some sort of give, some sort of leeway. Alright? You have to have that. Now, if you're going to be one of those individuals and you're going to decide that you feel the need to, well, what about this scenario? What about this scenario? What about this scenario? What happens if X happens? What happens if X and Z happen? What happens if A and Q and Z happen, but not Y happening? Figure it out. I can't give you a list of a checklist. Okay, if this happens but this doesn't happen, see addendum B-23A over here, but if this happens in this addendum here but this doesn't happen over here, see over here. I can't give you that. Critical thinking skills are important. You have to learn how to solve these problems here. I gave you the litmus test in previous episodes as well as in Morality Defined as to what violates consent to being interacted with. So you need to figure that out, and you need to work on that on your own. I cannot tell you the solution to every single interaction because there's an infinite number of possibilities available. Most of them will fall under specific categories, for sure, absolutely, but you're going to have to work on that and just understand that you have to have faith in yourself. You have to understand that you own you. I can't help you make a decision for you every step of the way. That's entirely up to you. And this critical thinking here is important. Okay, this critical thinking skill, it's what has developed our idea of what morality is. It is the foundation of morality. It is the foundation of the first boundary, okay, with that idea of morality. That amoral boundary in the effect is the recognition of self-ownership. That right there, you homesteaded yourself, now you own yourself. And with that homesteading comes the acquisition of and utilization of your three natural resources: time, intellect, and labor, in that order. You control that. Now, anything that you refine, okay, time, intellect, and labor, you go out into the woods in some lot that's abandoned, unclaimed, nobody's using anything with it. You go out in that lot and you pick up some twigs or kindling or whatever, or you pick up twigs and branches and stuff and you use it for kindling or to burn a fire. You have just refined your time, intellect, and labor, and now those sticks, and they become yours because you are transforming the purpose of those sticks from just something dying, decaying material that's going to go back into the earth and not be used for anything to maintain and or improve the quality of your life or some other life. You have just homesteaded those sticks. You have made those sticks into real wealth, something that is capable of directly satisfying one or more of the four basics of life. Okay? Sustenance, shelter, security, and happiness. So that property is now, by extension of refinement of your 3 natural resources, yours. You own those sticks. They are yours. Unless somebody else can come along and say they have a stronger claim to that, saying, hey, that's my lot, I just haven't had a chance to homestead it yet, I'm doing X, Y, and Z with it, then you have to give those sticks up. I mean, that's the basic right there for pretty much every interaction for respecting property. And it'll also translate into land later on when you decide that, or you have acquired land through some means by either making some attempt to homestead it or to secure it in some fashion, or somebody else has secured a bunch of little plots of land, and somehow through a series of completely voluntary, duress-free interactions, you have acquired this land, which amounts to let's say 250,000 acres. All of that land is now yours, so long as it was acquired voluntarily. Okay, now you have all that land, and there's going to be inevitably somebody's going to come up and they're going to say to you, well, what do you need 250,000 acres of land for? You can't possibly use all that yourself, specifically just you homestead all of that, so it doesn't belong to you anymore. Hang on just a second there. Regardless of how the individual acquired it, so long as the individual did not violate somebody else's consent to being interacted with, that individual who acquired through voluntary means 250,000 acres worth of land now owns 250,000 acres worth of land because you, Miss or Mr., you can't own that because you can't homestead all of that by yourself. The individual, whoever's saying this, is going to then somehow violate his or her own oath to being interacted with, his or her own, foundation of consent, of morality. Now, you can't just say somebody can't own something and then not give some sort of evidence as to why. Oh, because you're holding back people who could use that land and actually homestead it and make homes for themselves. Well, hold on, right just a second there. Exactly why haven't you tried, whoever is doing this complaining about 250,000 acres of land, why haven't you actually tried to go out there and get some plot of land for yourself and to homestead it yourself? It's not the person who just suddenly acquired 250,000 acres of land. It is not their fault whatsoever that you haven't done that. For whatever reason, you've decided not to or haven't been able to. It is not his fault. So to take from him to say that you can't take, or that he cannot have whatever it is that he has acquired through voluntary and peaceful means, and honest means, hopefully, it is not right. It would be a violation of his consent to being interacted with, in addition to the fact that he acquired that land through the respect of consent to interact with other individuals. Okay? So in no way can you have some claim over this land. You can't just for some moral good. What moral good? That he owes you something or he's somehow oppressing you? How is this individual oppressing you? If an individual has agreed to various interactions and contracts and can show a very solid, for lack of a better terminology, paper trail of evidence that proves that so-and-so gave him this piece of land, so-and-so agreed to give him this piece of land, and etc. For all of the transactions that built up into him owning 250,000 acres, who were you as the proponent of redistribution of wealth of this land? How are you going to justify violating his consent to being interacted with because what, you want to subsidize your inadequacies to provide for what you think is necessary for you to survive? It doesn't, no. It should not ever work that way. But yet it does work that way because too many people do not understand property as I have explained it. So if you can't homestead, if people aren't going to recognize homesteading themselves and then see the hypocrisy in taking something that was an extension of that individual's refinement of or claim on their own life to refine their own time, intellect, and labor, and maintain that claim and that extension, then how is it that you're going to not come across and end up with a system where people believe that they can take things through eminent domain? I mean, that's exactly what happens today, and it's a failure of people to understand the base foundation, the very center, the first building block of property rights. Okay, it's a failure in that regards, and it's very disheartening for that to be presented as such. Unfortunately, it's what has led to government. It has what has led to these terrible tyrannies that we have. And the only way we're going to be able to truly fix this is for people to understand the foundation of morality and liberty and where property rights come from, starting with self-ownership. So, now that we have cleared that, we have a good understanding of property rights, or at least we should at this point in time, and we understand this whole issue with the owning absurd amounts of property, land property. You figure it out. Look at that. How does that work to you owning, say, 10 acres of land? You build a house on a little portion of it, and you stockpile it full. You pack rat everything that you can have in there. Well, you refined your time, intellect, and labor to make those acquisitions peacefully, voluntarily, and hopefully honestly to get those things. So if somebody else comes along and takes this refinement of your 3 natural resources, okay, and they can somehow justify taking it from you where they actually have no claim on it whatsoever, they're essentially making you their slave for whatever amount of time it took for you specifically to refine your 3 natural resources in order to acquire the real wealth that you have, which maintains and or improves the quality of your life. This is a very big deal. It's a very huge concept, and it is one that not enough people understand. Typically, this land argument about 250,000 acres and being oppressed somehow, it comes from what are often ANCOMs, anarcho-communists, I suppose. I don't fully understand those positions, and I'm not going to even pretend I do. So I want you to understand that I don't know what all of that means. What I do know about is the foundations of liberty and morality. Everything else, it's just subjective, a subjective understanding of what liberty is all about and what morality is all about. It's unnecessary knowledge at the end of the day to understand. It's not worthless. It's just unnecessary in order to understand liberty. In fact, claiming to be a Christian, claiming to be Muslim, claiming to be Republican, claiming to be a constitutionalist, claiming to be an anarcho-communist. I mean, claiming to be any of these things, essentially, it's just the individual not being able to understand or not being able to explain because they understand the foundations of liberty and morality as I understand, as I have laid out in Liberty and Morality Defined. 2 separate books, Liberty Defined and Morality Defined. So, these are not difficult concepts to understand, but if you do not understand the basics, specifically morality defined, it is going to be very difficult to understand where property rights come from, starting with self-ownership, and then it's going to be very difficult to understand religions, okay, and liberty. Because not understanding that amoral foundation of morality, where you have recognized your life and your desire to protect it, to maintain it, to encourage it, however you see fit. Okay, so long as you want to maintain your life, you recognize the value on it. Okay, you've placed value on your life, you want that respected, and so you recognize the idea that somebody else, other people, must have some similar foundation of thought, if not the same thought. So you, in some way, you explain or you understand or come to some conclusion or some agreement with other individuals that you recognize that they have placed value on their lives and that they want that respected in the same way, or at least in a similar fashion that you do for your own. Now, this foundation of respect, of consent to being interacted with, it must default at 100%. Because how much you want your value, your life to be respected is subjective. It's arbitrary. It's up for your own interpretation and for you to interact with every other individual. And because not everybody's going to want to be interacted with the same way, the default should always be 100% respect for consent outside of the realm of your own self-defense all the time, unless you come to some other conclusion and agreement with each individual you interact with. That's important to understand, because if you don't, you're going to come up with unnecessary, unwarranted conflicts. You're going to come up with various religions that have different rules for different people based on a whole lot of different criteria. I mean, this is the problem with Christianity, with Judaism, and with Islam. All three of these major religions here, they all have some variation of why certain people should do this, how they should protect their own kind, and who they should protect them from, and it's all based off of this amoral foundation of morality. But not a single one of those religions, or any of their sub-branches or affiliates, or whatever you want to call them, actually recognize this amoral foundation specifically. They don't actually call it out. They leave it open for interpretation for some god or some major figure in their order or whatever to interpret what is right from wrong. And it doesn't have to be that way if people just look at the base foundation of what it is that individuals want to do, and that is simply to survive, to maintain their lives at the very least, if not later improve the quality of their lives. So it is absolutely of utmost importance to understand this foundation, because this foundation is what leads to property rights, to self-ownership first. And if we don't understand that, guess what's going to happen? We're going to raise children who then become an issue. We somehow justify violating the consent of other people to be interacted with because we don't like something that they're doing. We've interpreted morality as having some sort of a major issue. People don't understand. They have major conflicts with their ideologies that they maintain, and then they suddenly try to push us onto other people. Now, I think it would be fair to say that the majority of people agree that we should take care of children. We should educate them. Okay, and I'm going to say majority of people, and I mean the majority of humanity in general. They want what is generally best for their children, in most cases. But the more somebody is taught critical thinking skills, the more somebody is taught the ideas of self-ownership, the more someone is taught the foundations of morality, as I have explained here and in previous episodes, but particularly my book, Morality Defined, the more people are taught these foundations, the less and less their teachings are to their children open up for interpretation. Okay, they're not as subjective. It's not that these lessons are going to teach or justify the sacrificing of an individual's right to consent to being interacted with. And that's the issue with so many religions, and pretty much every government, I should say. So, children. Now, how does a child actually own his or herself? See, that's the thing, though. Children are interesting. How are children different than animals? Now, a wolf will take care of its own, but that's because genetics say so. And it kind of is the same thing for a human parent and a child. They instinctually, they usually take care of their own because it's a self-fulfilling, it's an instinct to perpetuate the species. It's essentially what it's about. And that is one thing that we do have in common with pretty much every other animal life form out there. It's to perpetuate the species. So, what happens? Do we own our children? I mean, from the standpoint of, well, the mother absolutely has a large claim of ownership to the child, and the mother is largely responsible, I would say, 99.9% responsible for the creation of that life. Now, don't get me wrong, the father has to have been involved in somehow, and we think it's morally righteous and morally correct, okay, to make sure that the father has an equal say, supposedly, in Western civilization and Western thought generally. Well, yes, but the mother could not have had that child also without the father. So depending on how the father interacted with the mother will determine certain privileges and whatnot with the mother. But specifically speaking, the mother and the father both homesteaded themselves and learned. They both learned how to take care of themselves and to maintain and improve the quality of their lives. So how did they do that? Well, they did that by having parents or a parent or guardians of some sort teach them in some way after taking care of them to the point where they could understand, where they could begin to develop critical thinking skills, reasoning skills, okay? That's important. That is important. Now, even cats, dogs, other animals, they still learn things, are capable of learning certain things from their parents. Most of the things are instinctual. So there is a large degree of separation between us and just regular animals. The distinction comes that with human beings having larger brains, greater capacity for thought, so far as we know anyway. I mean, I don't know everything that science knows off the top of my head, and I probably will never know, but just based on what I seem to observe as general knowledge, is that we are the only sentient species on this planet that we are aware of that can do this sort of stuff, that can reason. We have created a complex set of communication skills, reading and writing. I mean, we've created all sorts of things. We've taken complex machines and built complex machines on top of complex machines so that we can have flying machines. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. And the same thing works with teaching our children how to maintain their own lives, maintaining and recognizing self-ownership. Now, you would think that if we could create things like helicopters, that it would be easy to understand self-ownership and where it came from to teach it. But unfortunately, that's kind of... I wonder, do more people know how a helicopter works than the foundation of property rights and self-ownership? Do more people know that? I mean, which do they know? Come to think about it, how many of you were taught self-ownership as I have just explained it? How many of you? I wasn't. I wasn't taught any of that. I was taught obedience through fear. In that fear, I was afraid, so I was obedient to remove the possibility of future fear, and I listened and learned the skills my parents taught me. Well, that's how a lot of us are raised. Too many of us. I'm not going to speculate on a figure of exactly how many, but that is how a lot of it happened. Now, the contrasting position to that would be something along the lines of answer questions, teach how to ask and to answer questions, okay, develop critical thinking skills, and to teach the specific skills needed for maintaining life and improving its quality. Now, those are two different methods, and it's usually one or the two which is taught, and the latter doesn't seem to be taught as often. It's usually with a lot of religions which still grip much of human thought, so it seems to be, and that's just my perception. This religious thing, it's like with the Ten Commandments, obey thy mother and father. Obedience is, obedience through what kind of authority? Fear-based authority? If you recall, I just recorded an episode about authority real versus artificial. And so is this authority, fear-based, or is this voluntary based on consent to being interacted with, teaching critical thinking skills? Most of the religious teachings are fear-based. You don't obey your parents, you're going to go to hell. That's not a good foundation for teaching critical thinking skills. It's a great foundation for teaching obedience, but that obedience is only going to get you so far until they, before you know it, they're in their 30s and they still have no idea how to explain what it is that they feel should be right and just. And then we end up with individuals in this world, and I'm not saying it's always like this for everybody, but we end up with individuals in this world who, well, I study the Socratic method, so I absolutely do not have to prove to you that I own myself. You have to prove to me that you have a claim of ownership over me. Well, that may be so, and that may be the right, that you may be right in that defense, but I can tell you this much. If you cannot explain where you have acquired your authority to govern yourself, your claim on yourself, if you cannot explain that, you may end up doing a lot more fighting, okay, a lot more unnecessary, unwarranted conflict than peaceful exchange, especially if the goal is to convert people who are current proponents of government. These current proponents of government, those are the people who are causing us problems in the liberty movement for the most part, in addition to a number of other people in the liberty movements who cannot explain these foundations. So if we want to make sure that we can teach these things, we have to, or to be able to create allies, we need to do more than just be able to defend parts of our position. We have to be able to defend all of our positions. We are not going to lose this fight because we're incorrect. We will lose this fight every single time because we don't know how to explain the things that we know in our hearts to be correct. So, if we don't do these things, we will lose. Now, as far as children are concerned, our children, we always talk about leaving a better world for our children. But the truth is that in order to leave a better world for our children, we have to also be the example. And in order to be the example, we have to understand this. And in order to leave a better world for our children, we have to also leave better children for our world. And in order to leave better children for our world, we have to understand what it is that we're trying to teach. So, to suggest in any way that, my dear boy, do you ask how a bird flies? Yeah, actually I do, and I want to know. I want to know because I don't want to accept it just is as my answer. People have told me before, oh, well, it just is because that's just the, gravity is because it is. I'm not okay with that. Science may not have been able to figure out exactly what creates gravity, so far as I understand, and it's been a decade since I've been in college, or more, okay, studying physics. So, just because science may not be able to explain that, or science may not be able to explain what the universe actually is, is it just a great electron, or is it, the equivalent of twins in a woman's womb, where they're having a conversation and one says, when finally we leave this place, we'll be taken care of by the Great Mother, and she will feed us, and she will love us, and she will do these things. And then the other says, don't be kidding yourself like that. There's no such thing as the Great Mother. Once we leave this place, we'll be dead forever. We're never coming back. Have you ever seen anybody leave one of these places and come back? That's basically what, we don't know. That's what they're saying. But the thing is that eventually, given enough time, asking the right questions, and answering them honestly, we will figure it out. It's one question, one thought, one mind, one generation at a time. That's how we learn these things. But to understand property rights, to understand self-ownership, to understand morality and liberty, it's nowhere near as complicated as understanding the origins of the universe and what's beyond it, if there's anything beyond it at all. We don't know. So it's a little unfair and possibly short-sighted to suggest just because it is. And I'm not willing to accept that, and I hope you're not either. So if we can teach our children this, that will change the game later on in life, later on down the road for generations to come. And that's the point of the whole thing. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me on this whole concept of children being the parents' property until they can reason for themselves. But ask yourself this: what else can they be? Children are not quite animals, but they resemble, okay? They have many of the same characteristics as animals. Many cases they have to be taken care of, okay? They have to be taught. They have to be given a chance. And we don't have, a cat has kittens. Well, the kittens can't really take care of themselves. But in order to perpetuate the species, the female cat that gave birth to these kittens, typically 99.9% of the time, the cat will take care of the kittens until the kittens are able to grow their own claws and be able to grow the strength that's necessary and the agility to take care of themselves. Well, human beings aren't cats. They're not going to grow into 1,000-pound tigers with amazingly sharp claws, incredible stamina, massive strength, and be able to chase down and take care of itself. No, human beings develop critical thinking skills. That is the special gift and ability of human beings, to think critically, to problem solve. So we take care of our own in order to advance our species. Now, at what age does a child, suddenly become available and able to take care of him or herself? That's really going to depend on the individual. I know there are scientific studies that say that, well, so-and-so, such critical thinking skills don't develop completely until the age of 25 or whatever it is that they say. I don't know. I'm just pulling a number out of my head. I recall it being something along the lines of early to mid-20s, but I'm probably incorrect on that. But regardless of that, their children start to become self-aware. They start to have choices, the likes and dislikes at an early age, and for a variety of different reasons. What they typically cannot do is organize the thoughts in their head well enough to be able to explain these things to others, which makes it so that they need to be guided. And if we ask the right questions and we show enough patience, and if we understand that the things that we are trying to teach them, we will have much better success. And one of the things that we need to be able to teach them is the foundation of morality and essentially self-ownership. It's the epitome of responsibility. It is you cannot become any more responsible than that. It is like the apex of responsibility right there. Teaching your child this sort of stuff here. So, yes, you own your child, okay? Two consenting adults get together, a male and a female, and they decide to have a child. Well, it takes two to tango. Both parents have a say in that child. They agreed to bring the child into the world. The man agreed to care, or the man got the woman pregnant, agreed to take care of the woman. Okay? So the man has a responsibility to take care of the woman in order to see to it that his offspring, guess what, makes it into the world. And in order for that offspring to make it to the world, the man has to take care of it and provide for the woman as best he possibly can. Now, the child comes into the world, the woman is still typically going to be, and this is just a generalization, this is not meant to insult anybody, so please don't assume that I'm trying to exclude same-sex couples. It doesn't matter. It applies if two people wish to be that way. Somebody is going to have to take on a specific role. okay, in some capacity. It doesn't matter how deep or how great the capacity is, but somebody's going to have to take care of that role, the man's role, whether it's the man who got the woman pregnant, another man, or a woman, or anybody. It doesn't matter. Somebody's going to step into that role some cases, or some way. Somebody will do that, unless the woman is just incredibly strong and or is able to take care of and has, maybe money and stuff like that to take care of herself. She'll pay for that in various ways, in various means. And we can talk about that at a later episode, in a later date, if you want more clarification for that. But for now, it takes two to tango in this situation here, and so whoever is pregnant will be in a weakened state in order to care for that child, and will need to have some sort of help, depending on the overall outcome. Now, that child will have to be taught these things, and the child will have to be cared for, and as the child ages and grows and learns, the child slowly becomes self-aware. The child slowly becomes gets the idea that he or she owns himself and can start making decisions for him or herself. But until the child actually is capable of reasoning, okay, of explaining the ideas, and can give more than just a semblance of understanding about who controls his or her life, who's maintaining his or her life, then the child will remain under the care and property of the parents. Now, in a lot of countries, Western countries, it has become popular, I suppose, to say that the child is now an adult at the age of 18. Well, in antebellum America, when the settlers were moving west, going from the East Coast to the West Coast, okay, it was a common thing for the boys to kind of become young men at the age of about 12, 10, 11, 12. Children up until about then, but a lot of them would be given rifles to handle, and they would go out and they would go hunting with their dads or as other boys about their same age, and they would learn these things, and that was kind of a coming of age. That was about the time where they were starting to develop critical thinking skills faster and faster and faster. They weren't quite as babied, and I don't mean that in a harsh way. I mean, that's kind of what we do today. We in part hold back our children, and we put them all in the same classroom based on age instead of based on critical thinking skills, and it seems to have a negative effect on children. And I will also discuss this at a later date in a different episode. But critical thinking skills develop differently in different children, and a lot of it is based on environmental settings. Okay, so we have to recognize that every child is different, and so every child will make different decisions based on the things that they've experienced. Once a child is capable of reasoning, then it will be up to the parents and the child to determine, to find that common ground there. Now, like I said, most of us place that determination at about anywhere from 16 to 20. Most of the time it's right around 16, 17, and 18 years of age. And I don't typically agree with that. For a lot of people it's about the same. But we have so many people out in this world today, they have no idea how to do anything. And they are 18, 19, 20 years old. They aren't taught critical thinking skills. They're not ready. And that's really sad. But that's, again, a conversation for another day. So, really, what the deal is you own your children. They are property. But with each passing day, with each passing lesson, bit of each epiphany the child has, okay, they become less and less your property and more independent. And that is just because they cannot grasp fully and explain, because they don't learn, the same. It will vary from child to child. And I want to make this very clear. At this point, it's becoming a broken record. This is so very important to understand this. And I am going to catch so much flack for this, and I'm okay with that. I understand it. I have no problem answering questions about it. And it is something, at least this topic is out there. I'm not going to pretend to be the authority on this. But I am somebody who has given considerable thought to this. More than most, I would venture to say. So, property rights, children, and land. We've gone over all three things, and I'm interested to know what you think. What questions do you have? Would you like me to go into any of these particular subjects in a little more detail? If you would, please, by all means, if you're viewing this on YouTube, leave your questions and comments in the comment section below. If you are listening to this through Facebook, hit me up at facebook.com/libertydefined. Ask me your questions there. Or find me on Twitter at Jim Limber Davis. Now, if you've appreciated this podcast and you learned something from it and would like to show a little appreciation, in addition to sharing this with anybody you think would find it useful, by all means, please visit my website, www.jimlimberdavis.com, and feel free to donate a little bit of fiat currency. Every penny helps and is certainly appreciated. Well, that concludes this episode of Property Rights, Children, and Land, Episode 4 of Liberty and Morality Defined, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.